cold millionaire leaves, poor wife for mistress, then faces her shocking comeback with a secret baby. The room was alive with energy, a shimmering blend of luxury and exclusivity that only a place like the Plaza Hotel could offer. The annual New York Tech Innovators Gala was in full swing, with titans of the industry, socialites, and a smattering of celebrities basking in the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. The aroma of saffron-infused risotto and dry-aged steak wafted through the air as servers weaved expertly between tables draped in white linens. At the center of it all stood Daniel Grant. He wasn't just a guest, he was the star of the night. Dressed in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford tuxedo, he exuded confidence as he laughed and exchanged pleasantries with the who's who of Manhattan's elite. His wavy dark hair was meticulously styled, and his Rolex Submariner gleamed as he raised a glass of Dom Perignon to toast yet another successful year for Grant Technologies. "Daniel, darling, they're waiting for your speech," Evelyn Harper cooed, her voice like honey, but with an edge that demanded attention. Evelyn, his fiancée, was everything the tabloids adored. Her glittering Cartier necklace caught the light as she leaned in, her perfectly sculpted features framed by platinum blonde waves cascading down her shoulders. She wore a sleek black gown from Prada, and her signature red lips curled into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Daniel nodded, flashing her a grin that was more habit than sincerity. As he stepped up to the podium, a hush fell over the grand ballroom. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice deep and commanding. "When I founded Grant Technologies in a cramped garage in Ridgewood, New Jersey, I never imagined we'd be standing here tonight, celebrating another record-breaking year." The audience erupted in applause, but as Daniel looked out over the sea of faces, a strange sensation crept over him. The praise, the admiration, it all felt hollow. He shook off the thought and continued, weaving a tale of grit and ambition that the crowd devoured. Evelyn beamed at him from the front row, her gaze flickering briefly to the photographers, capturing their every move. Theirs was a carefully curated image, and she wouldn't let a single crack show. As the evening wore on, Daniel found himself at the bar, nursing a Macallan 18. He watched Evelyn across the room, her laughter ringing out as she charmed a group of investors. For a fleeting moment, his mind wandered back to another time, another woman. Sophia. Her name felt like a whisper in his mind, soft but persistent. He hadn't thought about her in months, maybe even years. Yet tonight, in the midst of all this opulence, memories of her came flooding back. He could almost see her, standing in their tiny apartment, her hair tied up in a messy bun, wearing one of his old Rutgers sweatshirts, as she balanced a steaming pot of spaghetti in one hand and a book on business strategy in the other. She had been his rock in those early days, when success was still a distant dream and every dollar mattered. She believed in him even when he doubted himself, but belief wasn't enough, not for him. When the company took off, Daniel became consumed by ambition. The life they built together began to feel too small, too ordinary. And then came Evelyn, polished, poised, and perfect for the world he wanted to conquer. He had convinced himself that leaving Sophia was the right decision. She deserved better, he told himself, but deep down, he knew better. The truth was, he had outgrown her, or so he thought. "Daniel," Evelyn's voice cut through his thoughts. She appeared beside him, slipping her arm through his. "You look distracted. Everything all right?" "Of course," he said, forcing a smile, just taking it all in. "Well, don't take too long. The board members from Goldman Sachs want to meet you. They're interested in the expansion plans for next quarter." Daniel nodded, setting down his glass. Evelyn always knew how to steer him back to the present, but tonight the weight of his choices felt heavier than usual. As they walked back into the crowd, a server passed by with a tray of desserts. One of the dishes caught his eye, a simple crème brûlée, topped with caramelized sugar. It was Sophia's favorite. She used to make it for him every Sunday night, even when they were scraping by. He shook his head, trying to clear the thought. But as the evening wore on, It became harder to ignore the gnawing feeling in his chest. For the first time in years, Daniel began to wonder if the life he had built was truly worth what he had sacrificed. Hundreds of miles away, in a small apartment in Chicago, Sophia Turner tucked her son, Alex, into bed. The 5-year-old's curls framed his cherubic face as he clutched his favorite stuffed dinosaur. "Mommy, will Daddy ever visit us?" he asked, his big brown eyes looking up at her. Sophia's heart clenched, but she kept her voice steady. "Maybe someday, sweetheart," she said, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "But for now, you've got me, and I've got you. That's all we need." She kissed his forehead and turned off the bedside lamp, retreating to the living room where a stack of fabric samples waited. Her fashion brand, Evergreen Designs, was finally gaining traction, and she had orders to fill. Yet tonight, as she worked under the soft glow of a desk lamp, her mind drifted. She hadn't thought about Daniel in a long time. But every now and then, she caught a glimpse of him in Alex's smile, or the way he furrowed his brow when concentrating. It was a bittersweet reminder of the man who had once been her everything. Little did she know, their worlds were about to collide again, setting off a chain of events that would change all their lives forever. Her apartment in Chicago's South Loop wasn't grand, but it was warm. The wooden floors creaked in familiar patterns, and the second-hand furniture bore the marks of years of use. A soft, earthy scent of lavender and cedar lingered, thanks to the candles she lit each evening after Alex was asleep. To her, this was home, not just a place to live, but a sanctuary she had built with her own 2 hands. Sophia sat at her small oak desk, the surface cluttered with fabric swatches, scissors, and a notebook filled with designs. Her fingers worked methodically, running over the soft texture of organic cotton as she jotted notes for her next collection. The faint hum of the sewing machine in the corner filled the silence, steady and purposeful. This wasn't just work. It was her lifeline, her promise to herself that she could provide for Alex without depending on anyone, least of all Daniel Grant. But tonight, Sophia's concentration wavered. The letter sitting at the edge of her desk kept pulling her gaze. The return address, Tech Innovators Foundation, New York City, felt oddly familiar, though she couldn't quite place why. She reached for the envelope, turning it over in her hands. It had arrived earlier that day, tucked in among the usual pile of bills and advertisements. Sophia hadn't opened it yet. Something about the sharp, clean font and the faint scent of cologne on the paper unsettled her. She took a deep breath and carefully slid her finger along the edge, breaking the seal. "Dear Ms. Turner, we are pleased to inform you that your company, Evergreen Designs, has been nominated for the Rising Innovator Award at this year's Tech Innovators Gala in New York City. Congratulations on this achievement, which recognizes your outstanding contributions to sustainable fashion." The words blurred as Sophia reread the letter. A mix of disbelief and pride surged through her. The Rising Innovator Award wasn't just any accolade, it was a career-defining moment. The names of past recipients were synonymous with success, and to even be nominated was a validation of everything she had worked for. Yet a gnawing hesitation crept in. The event was in New York. The same city she had left behind, the same world Daniel inhabited. She hadn't been back since the divorce. The thought of walking into a room filled with people who might recognize her, who might remember her as the quiet, unassuming wife of Daniel Grant, made her stomach churn. Sophia set the letter down and ran a hand through her hair, now a few shades darker than it had been in those days. It had taken years to find herself again, to build a life where she wasn't defined by someone else's shadow. Did she really want to risk that for one night? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft whimper from Alex's room. She stood, her slippers padding against the hardwood floor, as she made her way down the short hallway. The door creaked open to reveal Alex, his small frame curled under a quilt decorated with planets and stars. "Mommy," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "I had a bad dream." Sophia knelt beside him, her hand brushing over his curls. "What happened, sweetheart?" she asked softly. "I dreamed that you went away and didn't come back," Alex said, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Her chest tightened at his words. Alex had always been sensitive, deeply aware of the world around him in ways that often surprised her. She kissed his forehead and pulled the quilt up to his chin. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. "You're stuck with me, little man." Alex gave a small smile and nestled into his pillow. "Okay," he whispered before closing his eyes. Later that night, Sophia sat by the window, staring out at the glittering skyline. The invitation was still in her hand. A part of her wanted to throw it away, to stay in the safe, steady world she had created for herself and Alex. But another part, the part that had pushed her to start Evergreen Designs, to fight for a better future, knew she couldn't ignore this opportunity. She reached for her phone and dialed the one person she knew would understand. "Hi, Cassie," Sophia said, when her best friend picked up. Cassie Porter had been her anchor during the divorce, a fierce and unapologetic champion of Sophia's potential. She now lived in Denver, but the distance hadn't dulled their bond. "Sophie." "It's late. What's going on?" Cassie asked, her voice warm but tinged with concern. Sophia hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the letter. "I got an invitation to the Tech Innovators Gala." There was a pause before Cassie's laughter rang through the line. "That's amazing. Your work is finally getting the recognition it deserves." "It's in New York," Sophia said, her voice quieter now. Cassie's tone softened. "Ah, Daniel territory." Sophia let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, I don't know, Cass. Part of me feels like it's not worth it. I've moved on, and this feels like opening a door I worked so hard to close." "But what if it's not about the door?" Cassie said. "What if it's about showing the world and yourself that you've built something incredible? You don't need Daniel or anyone else to validate that. You've done this on your own." The words hung in the air, settling into Sophia's heart like a quiet truth. She glanced at the stack of designs on her desk, at the life she had built piece by piece. Maybe Cassie was right. Maybe this wasn't about the past at all. In New York, Daniel Grant sat alone in his sprawling penthouse. The city lights poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the sleek modern furniture and the untouched dinner tray on the marble countertop. Daniel scrolled through his phone, stopping when he saw an email notification. Tech Innovators Gala final list of nominees announced. Curious, he opened the attachment and skimmed the names. His eyes froze when he saw it. Sophia Turner, Evergreen Designs. For the first time in years, the name stirred something in him, something he couldn't quite name. He set his phone down and poured himself another drink, his mind restless. He didn't know it yet, but the storm he thought he had left behind was about to catch up with him. Sophia Turner had never been a stranger to doubt, but as the plane touched down at John F. Kennedy International Airport, she felt an unease that went beyond the usual jitters of air travel. The city skyline came into view, its jagged edges piercing through the pale morning mist. She hadn't set foot in New York in nearly 6 years, not since she had left everything behind: her marriage, her dreams of a family, and the life she once thought was hers to keep. Alex sat beside her, his small hands gripping the armrest as he looked out the window with wide-eyed excitement. "Mom, is this where the superheroes live?" he asked, his voice barely louder than a whisper. Sophia smiled, her chest tightening at his innocence. "Some of them, maybe," she replied, ruffling his curls. She had told him they were going on a special trip for her work, but she hadn't mentioned the real reason they were here, not the gala, not the nomination, and certainly not the possibility of crossing paths with Daniel. Alex was too young to understand the complexities of their situation, and Sophia wasn't ready to explain it. Not yet. The cab ride from the airport was a cacophony of honking horns, screeching brakes, and the chatter of a city that seemed to operate at double speed. Alex pressed his face to the window, his nose leaving faint smudges on the glass as he pointed out towering skyscrapers and flashing billboards. "Look, Mum, that building's touching the clouds," he exclaimed, gesturing toward the spire of the Empire State Building. Sophia chuckled, grateful for his enthusiasm. "It does look like that, doesn't it?" she said, though her own gaze was fixed firmly on her lap. The city felt too familiar, its streets and landmarks pulling at memories she had tried so hard to bury. When the cab finally pulled up in front of their hotel, a modest but comfortable boutique near Bryant Park, Sophia felt a knot loosen in her chest. This wasn't the same neighborhood she and Daniel had lived in. There were no ghosts here, no reminders of the life she had left behind. It was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. The gala was still 2 days away, but Sophia had planned the trip carefully, leaving room for both work and a little exploration with Alex. That evening, she called Cassie to check in, her voice lowered as Alex played with his toy dinosaurs in the background. "How's the Big Apple treating you?" Cassie asked, her tone bright and teasing. Sophia let out a breathy laugh. "Overwhelming, as always. But Alex loves it. He keeps asking if Spider-Man is going to swing by." "Smart kid," Cassie said. "And you? How are you holding up?" Sophia hesitated, glancing at Alex. His laughter filled the room as he made his T-Rex battle a Triceratops. "I'm okay," she said finally. "It's strange being back. Feels like a different lifetime." Cassie's voice softened. "That's because it was a different lifetime. You're not the same person you were back then, Soph. And that's a good thing." Sophia nodded, even though Cassie couldn't see her. "I know, it's just, I don't know if I'm ready to face him. If he's even there. Ready or not, you're going to be fine," Cassie said firmly. "You've built a life for yourself, one that doesn't depend on him or anyone else. Remember that." Across the city, Daniel Grant sat in his penthouse, staring at the glowing skyline. He had been restless all day, pacing the polished hardwood floors of his office as emails piled up in his inbox. His assistant had left hours ago, but Daniel couldn't bring himself to leave his desk. The name Sophia Turner kept echoing in his mind. He had looked her up after seeing the nominee list, though he wasn't sure why. Her company's website was sleek and understated, much like Sophia herself. The photos showed her work sustainable fabrics, minimalist designs, but none of her. It frustrated him more than he cared to admit. He wanted to see her, to know what her life looked like now. Evelyn had noticed his distraction earlier that evening. She had breezed into his office in a cloud of Chanel No. 5, her heels clicking against the floor as she leaned against his desk. "You've been brooding all day," she said, her tone half curious, half irritated. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Daniel replied, his voice clipped. Evelyn arched a perfectly sculpted brow. "You're a terrible liar," she said. But when he didn't respond, she shrugged and left him alone. Now, as he stared out the window, Daniel wondered what he would say if he saw Sophia again. Would she still hate him? Did she even think about him at all? The questions nagged at him, questions he had no right to ask but couldn't ignore. The next morning, Sophia and Alex set out to explore the city. They visited Central Park, where Alex ran through the open fields and climbed the giant rocks, his laughter echoing against the backdrop of towering trees. They had lunch at a small diner near Columbus Circle, where Sophia let Alex order a stack of pancakes bigger than his head. As they walked back to the hotel, Sophia caught sight of a bookstore tucked into a quiet side street. The sight of it made her pause. It looked almost identical to the one she and Daniel used to visit on lazy Sunday afternoons, back when life was simpler. She hesitated, then decided to step inside. The smell of old books and fresh coffee enveloped her as they entered. Alex darted toward the children's section, and Sophia wandered through the aisles, her fingers brushing the spines of novels and memoirs. For a moment, she felt a pang of nostalgia, a reminder of the quiet moments she used to treasure. "Mom, look!" Alex called, holding up a picture book about dinosaurs. His face was lit with excitement, and Sophia smiled despite the ache in her chest. "That's a great choice," she said, ruffling his curls. "Let's get it." Later that afternoon, as they strolled through Bryant Park, Sophia felt the weight of the past begin to lift. The city was overwhelming, yes, but it was also alive in a way that reminded her of why she had fallen in love with it all those years ago. As they stopped to watch a street performer juggle flaming torches, Sophia felt her phone buzz in her pocket. She pulled it out, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the sender, Tech Innovators Foundation. The message was brief, a reminder about the gala, along with an updated guest list. Sophia scanned the names, her breath catching when she saw it, Daniel Grant. Her stomach tightened. She had known it was a possibility, but seeing his name in black and white made it real. For the first time, she questioned whether she could go through with this. As Alex tugged on her hand, pointing to a nearby fountain, Sophia forced herself to smile. "Let's go see," she said, her voice steady. But inside, her resolve wavered. Sophia Turner woke before dawn, the grey light of the city creeping through the hotel room's thin curtains. For a few moments, she sat at the edge of the bed, staring out at the distant skyline. The day of the gala had arrived, and with it came a restless energy that she couldn't shake. Alex was still asleep, curled under a blanket that barely covered his small frame. The sight of him calmed her racing heart. She reached out to gently brush a curl away from his face, careful not to wake him. His innocence, his unshaken trust in the world, was a steadying force, a reminder of why she was here. Sophia stood, wrapping a soft robe around herself as she made her way to the kitchenette. The coffee maker sputtered and hissed as it filled her mug with the bitter liquid she relied on to start her mornings. She cradled the cup in her hands, the warmth grounding her as she stared out at the city that had once been her home. She had tried to prepare herself for this moment, telling herself that the gala was about her work, her success. But as the hours ticked closer, the truth gnawed at her resolve. This wasn't just about evergreen designs. It was about the past she had left behind and the man she had once loved. Across the city, Daniel Grant stood in his penthouse bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His razor hovered just above his jawline, but his mind was elsewhere. The email from the Tech Innovators Foundation had been sitting in his inbox all night, and though he had read it a dozen times, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Sophia Turner. The name felt like a weight pressing down on his chest. He had debated skipping the gala altogether, something Evelyn had been quick to dismiss as absurd. "You're one of the keynote speakers, Daniel," she had said the night before, her tone sharp. "You can't just not show up because of what? An old flame?" "Please," Daniel hadn't argued. He wasn't even sure what he would say, but as he adjusted his tie in the mirror and glanced at the expensive watch on his wrist, he felt an unease he couldn't quite name. The man staring back at him looked every bit the part of a successful entrepreneur, confident, polished, in control. But beneath the surface, cracks had started to form. Sophia spent the late morning and early afternoon preparing for the evening. She had arranged for Alex to stay with a hotel babysitter, an older woman with a kind face who had won Alex over with stories of her own grandchildren. "Be good for Miss Clara," Sophia said as she knelt beside Alex, smoothing out the collar of his shirt. "I'll be back before you know it." "Okay, Mommy," Alex said, his voice cheerful but tinged with curiosity. "Are you going somewhere fancy?" Sophia hesitated before smiling. "Just a little work thing," she said, ruffling his curls. "Nothing to worry about." In truth, she had agonized over what to wear. She didn't want to stand out, but she also didn't want to fade into the background. After hours of indecision, she settled on a floor-length emerald green gown, its flowing fabric understated yet elegant. The color brought out the warmth in her hazel eyes, a subtle nod to her confidence in how far she had come. As she looked at herself in the mirror, Sophia felt a mix of pride and trepidation. This was the woman she had fought to become independent, resilient, strong. But tonight she would be stepping back into a world where that strength would be tested. By the time Sophia arrived at the Plaza Hotel, the evening was already in full swing. The grand ballroom was a sea of glittering chandeliers, opulent floral arrangements, and impeccably dressed guests. Waiters in crisp uniforms moved between the crowd, carrying trays of champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres. Sophia took a steadying breath as she stepped inside. Her name had been checked off the guest list, and the weight of expectation hung heavy in the air. She felt the curious stares of strangers, the polite smiles of acquaintances she barely remembered. But then she saw him. Daniel stood near the bar, a glass of whiskey in his hand as he spoke with a small group of men in tailored suits. His presence was magnetic, as it had always been. He wore a sleek black tuxedo, his posture relaxed but commanding. For a moment, Sophia froze, her heart pounding in her chest. He hadn't seen her yet, but the sight of him stirred something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't love, not anymore, but it wasn't anger either. It was something in between, a mixture of emotions that she had spent years trying to unravel. Daniel felt her presence before he saw her. It was a strange sensation, like the faint hum of electricity in the air. He turned, his gaze scanning the room until it landed on her. Sophia. She was standing near the entrance, her gown a striking shade of green that seemed to glow under the ballroom lights. Her hair was swept into an elegant updo, and her expression was calm, poised. But her eyes held the same fire that had once drawn him to her. For a moment, Daniel couldn't move. The years seemed to melt away, and he was back in their tiny apartment, watching her laugh as she cooked dinner or curled up on the couch with a book. But then reality crashed back in, and he was reminded of everything that had happened since. He excused himself from the conversation and took a step toward her, unsure of what he would say. But before he could reach her, someone else stepped in, a man with salt and pepper hair and a warm smile. "Ms. Turner," the man said, his voice smooth and familiar. Sophia recognized him immediately. Jonathan Pierce, the CEO of a major retail chain and one of the keynote speakers for the evening. "Mr. Pierce," Sophia replied, her voice steady as she extended her hand. "It's an honor to meet you." "The honor is mine," Pierce said with a smile. "Your work with Evergreen Designs is impressive. I've been following your journey for some time now." Sophia felt a flush of pride. Pierce's praise wasn't just polite small talk, it was genuine. They spoke for several minutes, discussing her designs and the future of sustainable fashion. The conversation grounded her, giving her a sense of purpose amidst the chaos of the evening. But even as she spoke, she could feel Daniel's gaze on her. He hadn't approached yet, but she knew it was only a matter of time. The hum of conversation filled the ballroom like a low, steady current, punctuated by bursts of laughter and the occasional clink of crystal glasses. Sophia Turner stood by one of the tall windows overlooking Fifth Avenue, her hand loosely holding a flute of sparkling water. She had purposefully chosen a spot on the fringe of the crowd where she could observe without being pulled too deeply into the throng. It was safer here, quieter, a place where she could catch her breath. But the feeling of safety didn't last. She felt it again, the faint charge in the air, the weight of someone's gaze lingering on her. She knew who it was without looking. Daniel Grant. Her fingers tightened imperceptibly around the glass, the cool condensation against her skin grounding her as she fought the rising tide of emotion. She didn't want to face him, not here, not now, but avoiding him in a room like this was impossible. Daniel hesitated, his polished shoes planted firmly on the ballroom's marble floor. He had started towards Sophia 3 times already, only to stop himself each time. The years that had passed since their last meeting seemed to compress into a single moment, and he was no longer the confident man who commanded boardrooms and investors. Instead, he felt like the man who had once stood in their small kitchen, fumbling for words as she looked at him with quiet disappointment. But now, as he saw her standing by the window, poised and radiant, he knew he couldn't delay any longer. Taking a steadying breath, he crossed the room, his steps deliberate, measured. "Sophia," he said softly when he was close enough for her to hear. She turned, her expression carefully neutral. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, charged with the weight of all the unsaid words between them. "Daniel," she replied finally, her voice even, "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "Likewise," he said, though it wasn't entirely true. He had known she would be here. He had read her name on the nominee list, and yet seeing her now in the flesh felt like a shock to the system. "I heard about Evergreen Designs," Daniel began, his tone tentative. "Congratulations. The nomination is well deserved." Sophia's lips curved into a faint smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "I've worked hard for it." Her words carried a weight that Daniel couldn't ignore. He could hear the subtext, the quiet defiance in her voice. This success was hers, and hers alone. "I always knew you had it in you," he said, the words coming out before he could stop them. He winced internally, knowing how hollow they sounded. Sophia tilted her head slightly, her gaze cool. "Did you?" she asked. "Funny. I don't remember you saying that back then." Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. He had always admired Sophia's strength, her determination, but he had never told her that. Instead, he had let his own insecurities drive a wedge between them. "I made mistakes," he admitted finally, his voice quieter. "More than I can count." Sophia studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Yes," she said simply. "You did." The conversation could have ended there, but Daniel wasn't ready to walk away. He felt an urgency he couldn't quite explain, a need to bridge the chasm between them, even if only slightly. "How have you been?" he asked, though the question felt inadequate. Sophia raised an eyebrow, her tone dry. "Do you mean since you left me, or since I rebuilt my life?" Her words landed like a blow, and Daniel flinched. "Both," he said honestly. "I want to know." Sophia let out a soft laugh, though it carried no warmth. "I don't think you really do," she said. "But if you must know, I've been fine. Better than fine, actually. I have a business I'm proud of, a life I've built on my own terms." She paused, her gaze sharp. "And I have a son who means the world to me." Daniel's breath caught. A son. He hadn't expected that, hadn't even considered the possibility. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Sophia saw the flicker of surprise in Daniel's eyes, followed by something else, regret, perhaps, or guilt. It was hard to tell, and she wasn't sure she cared. "His name is Alex," she said, her voice softer now. "He's 5, smart, kind, and curious about the world. He's everything I could have hoped for." Daniel nodded slowly, processing her words. "You're a mother," he said, almost to himself. That's wonderful, Sophia." She gave a small, tight smile. "Yes, it is." There was a pause, the silence stretching taut between them. Daniel wanted to ask more about Alex, about her life, but he knew he had no right to. Not after everything. "You seem happy," he said finally. "I am," she replied, her tone firm. "I worked hard for this happiness, Daniel, and I won't let anything take it away." Her words were a quiet warning, and Daniel understood. Whatever his intentions, whatever guilt or longing he felt, he couldn't erase the past. He could only confront it, piece by painful piece. Before Daniel could respond, a voice cut through the tension. "Daniel, there you are." Evelyn Harper appeared at his side, her presence as commanding as ever. Dressed in a shimmering silver gown, she looked every inch the socialite, her smile bright but sharp. Her gaze flickered to Sophia, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And who is this?" she asked, her tone cool but polite. Sophia straightened, meeting Evelyn's gaze head-on. "Sophia Turner," she said, her voice steady. "I'm one of the nominees tonight." Evelyn's smile tightened. "Ah, yes, the sustainable fashion designer. I've heard about you." She extended a perfectly manicured hand. "Evelyn Harper." Sophia shook her hand briefly, her expression neutral. "Pleasure," she said, though the word carried no warmth. The interaction was brief but charged, the tension palpable. Evelyn looped her arm through Daniel's, her smile widening as she looked up at him. "Come on, darling. They're about to announce the next round of awards." Daniel hesitated, his gaze lingering on Sophia. "It was good to see you," he said softly. Sophia nodded, her expression unreadable. "You too." As he walked away with Evelyn, Sophia turned back to the window, her chest tight. She had faced him, spoken her truth, and held her ground. But as the evening unfolded, she knew this was only the beginning. Sophia Turner didn't linger by the window for long. The gala was about her work, about celebrating evergreen designs and the journey she had taken to get here. Letting her emotions fester, letting her mind spiral back into the past, wasn't part of the plan. She placed her glass on a passing server's tray, squared her shoulders, and stepped deeper into the ballroom. The crowd seemed denser now, the murmur of conversations rising with each passing moment. As she moved through the room, she was greeted with polite smiles and nods from industry peers and well-wishers. Her name had gained recognition in the sustainable fashion space, and tonight was supposed to be a milestone, a moment of triumph. Yet the encounter with Daniel lingered, casting a shadow she couldn't quite shake. Sophia found herself near a small seating area at the edge of the ballroom, where a cluster of chairs and low tables provided a reprieve from the bustling crowd. She sank into one of the seats, grateful for a moment to collect her thoughts. From her clutch, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos stored there until she landed on one of Alex. He was grinning at the camera, his small hands holding up a Lego spaceship he had painstakingly built just a week ago. Her heart softened. Alex was her world, her anchor. Everything she had done since leaving New York, every sleepless night, every sacrifice had been for him. And now, being here, so close to the past she had left behind, felt like a test of her strength. As she stared at the photo, she felt a presence nearby. She looked up to see Jonathan Pierce, the CEO who had spoken with her earlier. His warm smile and relaxed demeanor were a welcome distraction. "Miss Turner," he said, pulling out a chair beside her. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Sophia said, slipping her phone back into her clutch. "Please, have a seat." Pierce sat down, his tailored suit as immaculate as ever. "I wanted to say again how impressed I am with your work," he said. "It's rare to see someone approach fashion with such purpose and integrity. The industry needs more voices like yours." Sophia smiled, the compliment landing more deeply than she expected. "Thank you," she said. "That means a lot, coming from someone like you." "Don't underestimate yourself," Pierce said, his tone encouraging. "You've built something remarkable, and I suspect this is only the beginning." They talked for several minutes, their conversation easy and fluid. Sophia found herself relaxing, her earlier tension easing as Pierce shared insights about his own journey in retail and the challenges he had faced along the way. It was refreshing to speak with someone who understood the struggles of building something from the ground up, someone who respected the value of hard work and perseverance. Across the room, Daniel stood with Evelyn and a small group of investors, but his attention wasn't on the conversation. His gaze kept drifting to the corner where Sophia sat with Jonathan Pierce. The sight of her smiling, her posture relaxed, stirred something inside him, an ache he couldn't quite name. Evelyn noticed his distraction. She leaned closer, her voice low. "You've been somewhere else all evening," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut through the din of the room. "Care to share what's so fascinating?" Daniel straightened, his expression neutral. "Just thinking about the speech," he said, deflecting. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly, but she let it go, turning her attention back to the group. Daniel exhaled, grateful for the reprieve, but the knot in his chest remained. Seeing Sophia again had thrown him off balance, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something important was slipping through his fingers. The hum of conversation quieted as the host of the evening stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. It was time to announce the winner of the Rising Innovator Award, and the room turned its attention to the front of the ballroom. Sophia felt her pulse quicken as the nominees were called out one by one. Her name was among them, her photo displayed on the large screen behind the stage. She clasped her hands in her lap, her nerves a steady drumbeat in her chest. "And the Rising Innovator Award goes to the host," began, pausing for dramatic effect. "Sophia Turner of Evergreen Designs." The room erupted in applause, and for a moment Sophia felt frozen. Then the reality of what had just happened sank in. She stood, her heart pounding, as she made her way to the stage. The applause felt almost surreal, a symphony of recognition she had never expected. As she accepted the award, a clear glass trophy etched with her name, she spoke into the microphone. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "This recognition means more than I can express." Evergreen Designs was born out of a belief that fashion can be more than just clothing. It can be a force for change, for sustainability, for good. And tonight, standing here, I'm reminded that hard work, passion, and resilience truly matter. Her words were met with another round of applause, and as she left the stage, she felt a sense of triumph that had been years in the making. As the evening wound down, Sophia found herself in the hallway outside the ballroom, the trophy still in her hand. She needed a moment away from the crowd, a moment to process everything. It was then that she heard his voice. "Sophia." She turned to see Daniel standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable. "Congratulations," he said, his tone quiet but sincere. "You deserve it." "Thank you," she said, her guard still up. For a moment they stood in silence, the tension between them palpable. Then Daniel spoke again, his voice tinged with regret. "I'm sorry for how things ended," he said. "I've been sorry for a long time." Sophia's gaze didn't waver. "Sorry doesn't change what happened," she said. "It doesn't erase the choices you made or the pain they caused." "I know," Daniel said, "but I wanted you to know that I see you now, Sophia. I see everything you've accomplished, everything you've become, and I'm proud of you." Her heart clenched at his words, but she didn't let it show. "I didn't need your pride to get here," she said, her voice steady. "I built this life without you, Daniel, and I'm not looking back." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the dimly lit hallway. Sophia stepped back into her hotel suite, the glass trophy still clutched in her hand. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the city outside the window. She set the award down on the desk and exhaled deeply, the evening's events replaying in her mind like a film on loop. Alex's soft snores drifted from the bedroom, a soothing reminder of what truly mattered. As she moved toward the small kitchenette to pour herself a glass of water, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen and hesitated. It was a message from Daniel. "I'd like to talk, for Alex's sake, please." Sophia's jaw tightened, and she placed the phone down without responding. She wasn't ready to open that door again. Not now. Maybe not ever. Across the city, Daniel sat in his penthouse, nursing a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched in hours. The evening had been a whirlwind of emotions, and Sophia's words echoed in his mind. "I built this life without you, Daniel, and I'm not looking back." She was right, of course. She had built something extraordinary, something she had never needed him for. And yet he couldn't ignore the ache in his chest, the knowledge that he had been the one to throw it all away. Evelyn had gone to bed hours ago, oblivious to the storm raging within him. He stared out at the city lights, wondering if there was any way to make amends, not for his sake, but for Sophia's and Alex's. He had seen the fire in her eyes, the fierce love she had for their son, and he knew deep down that he wanted to be part of Alex's life. But how could he earn that right? Sophia woke to the sound of Alex's giggles. She found him sitting on the bed with Clara, the babysitter, who was showing him how to fold paper into airplanes. "Good morning, Mommy," Alex said brightly, holding up a slightly crooked paper plane. "Look what I made." "That's amazing," Sophia said, her heart warming at his excitement. "Thank you, Clara." Clara smiled. "He's a delight, as always. I'll let you two enjoy the morning." With a nod, she gathered her things and left. As Sophia helped Alex get ready for their day, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Daniel. She ignored it, focusing instead on Alex, who was chattering about all the places he wanted to visit before they left New York. "Can we go to the park again?" he asked, his eyes wide with anticipation. "Of course," Sophia said, ruffling his curls. "The park sounds perfect." Sophia and Alex spent the late morning at Central Park, walking through the sprawling greenery and stopping at a playground where Alex joined a group of children climbing a jungle gym. Sophia watched from a nearby bench, sipping coffee from a small cafe she had passed on their way. She didn't notice Daniel until he was standing a few feet away, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat. "May I sit?" he asked, his voice careful, measured. Sophia glanced at him, her instinct to refuse warring with her curiosity. After a moment she nodded. Daniel sat down, the space between them feeling vast, despite the closeness. He didn't speak right away, his eyes fixed on Alex as he laughed and played with the other children. "He looks like you," Daniel said finally, his voice soft. Sophia's chest tightened. "He's his own person," she said. "Strong, resilient, kind." Daniel nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I can see that." For a while they sat in silence, the sound of children playing filling the space between them. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "I know I've hurt you, Sophia. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But Alex, I want to know him. I want to be part of his life, if you'll allow it." Sophia turned to him, her gaze sharp. "Being part of his life isn't something you just get to decide, Daniel. It's something you have to earn. And even then, it's not about what you want. It's about what's best for him." "I understand," Daniel said, his voice steady. "And I'm willing to do whatever it takes." The conversation didn't end with a resolution, but it planted a seed, an acknowledgement of the past, and a tentative willingness to move forward. As they left the park, Sophia couldn't ignore the weight of the decision she would have to make. That evening, back in the hotel, she sat by the window with Alex asleep in the next room. She thought about the life she had built, the strength it had taken to get here, and she thought about Alex, about the questions he might one day ask about his father. Her phone buzzed one last time that night, but this time it wasn't a message. It was a call from Daniel. She stared at the screen for a long moment before finally picking it up. "Daniel," she said, her voice quiet. "Sophia," he replied, his tone careful. "Thank you for answering." Months later, back in Chicago, Sophia found herself walking through the park near her apartment, Alex running ahead with his favorite toy dinosaur. She watched him with a soft smile, the crisp autumn air brushing against her cheeks. Behind her she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She turned to see Daniel, a cautious but genuine smile on his face. He had flown in for the weekend, part of the slow, deliberate effort they had agreed upon. Sophia wasn't sure where the future would lead, but for now she was willing to take it one step at a time for Alex, for herself, and perhaps even for Daniel. Life was a complicated weave of choices, mistakes, and second chances. And while the past could never be erased, the future was still unwritten. And so life proved that every choice has its consequences. For Sophia, it was a journey of resilience and strength, carving her own path despite the betrayals of the past. For Daniel, it was a reckoning, a reminder that redemption is earned, not given. This story reminds us that while we can't change the past, we can shape the future with courage, forgiveness, and determination. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this. Turn on the notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.